you everyone for joining today's joint panel between Microsoft and Thorogood, where we will be both discussing and demoing Azure Synapse Analytics, which just went into general availability last month, and Azure Purview, which is currently in preview. We do have 30 minutes of jam-packed content for you before we dive into a 15-minute Q&A session. So this is a prompt for everyone here on the line. Feel free to use the chat panel in Teams to go ahead and send questions throughout the presentation. We'll be collecting them on our side and getting them ready for that 15-minute Q&A at the end. So you're going to be hearing from a few of us today on the line on the Thorogood side. My name is Amanda Kwan. I'm joined by my colleagues Deepika and Ben. We do have a few other Thorogood folks on the line who you may hear from during the Q&A later on, but all of us are business intelligence and analytics consultants. I'm speaking to you from Boston, Deepika's in London, Ben's in Philly. And we are very grateful to be joined today by Alex from Microsoft, a cloud solution architect who will provide his expertise on these tools and really the wider Microsoft landscape as well. He too is joining us from just outside of Philadelphia. Quick introduction on Thorogood for those of you who are less familiar with us. We are a data and analytics specialty consultancy firm. And simply put, we help our customers with their data. And that can be anywhere from like designing and architecting and building an end-to-end cloud application or solution. It could be defining a strategy for your organization on how to organize your team and kind of adjacent teams working together and handling these data and analytic applications. It could be user empowerment and training programs to get the right skill sets for your individuals on your team to manage data. So anything really that touches data and analytics, that's ultimately what we've been helping our customers do for over 30 years now. We have offices around the globe. You might have gotten a sense of that already by where our presenters are currently located. We have offices in London, Philly, Boston, Singapore, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Bangalore, India. And really the heart of our business is understanding our customers' business goals, bringing to the table what we know the technical breadth and depth of possibilities are, and collaborating and providing a joint vision on how to get our customers to where they want to be. We are an independent consultancy, so we do leverage a wide range of tools when we are servicing our customers. But we do partner with a very strategic set of technology vendors in the space that we see as particularly important in driving value for our customers. And the partnership of relevance today being that for Microsoft. We've been a Microsoft Gold partner for over 15 years across a few specialties that you can see on the slide. So data analytics, data platform, et cetera. We run many educational webinars, such as today's joint panel, and other trainings like Power BI dashboard in a day. I think we were just offline talking about paginated reports in a day, analytics in a day, et cetera. We're one of the partners chosen for Microsoft's Aspire program to help drive the adoption of Synapse Analytics, and we are approved to host Azure solutions for our customers. So our agenda for today, here on the screen, we'll start with an overview of Microsoft's data landscape, and then dive into first Synapse Analytics, and then Purview, wrapping everything up in a nice bow with some key takeaways, and then going right into that Q&A panel. Once again, secondary prompt, please do feel free to send questions through the chat pane throughout today's presentation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alex from Microsoft.
Okay, thanks, Amanda, and good morning, everybody. So as you saw on the agenda, today I'm going to cover a couple of slides, starting out with kind of a high-level strategic vision around what the data landscape looks like to Microsoft. And then on the next slide, we'll dig in just a little bit deeper and start to tee up some of the specific services that we're going to cover throughout the balance of the session today. So to start, I'm sure many of you have heard this, but Microsoft's mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So when it comes to the data landscape, what that means is in order to achieve more, every organization will require some form of digital transformation. And in the coming years, economic performance will be directly tied to the speed of that transformation. So in order to succeed, every company will need to invest in tech intensity. which is kind of a buzzword that we use a lot. And to me, what that means is how you adopt the latest technologies, how you build unique capabilities, and having trust in technology and business model alignment around those. Tech intensity will enable organizations to empower employees, engage customers, optimize operations, and transform products that will ultimately be defined by two key attributes: analytical power and predictive power. Both of these require having the ability to easily discover and gain insights from data, because in order to succeed, we believe that all data must be accessible to everybody across the entire company, ranging from analysts to engineers to C-suites and everything in between. So in summary, I'd say that we believe it's critical to be able to turn data into actionable insights for everyone in the organization so that they're able to do their best work. And when you think about the dimensions that come into play as part of that conversation, you'll see them on the slide here that we're sharing. And the first would be responsiveness, which means how fast can you answer new business questions and deliver data insights. And then we look at how dependable and reliable are the solutions that you build to respond to those questions. Performance at scale is obviously critical as we talk about bringing in all these new workloads and all of the data at the scale that we're talking about today. Integration with existing and new DevOps tools and services. Flexibility to make sure you're implementing the right tools for the right jobs, and a focus on innovation to keep pace with both your competitors and the industry as a whole. All right, so moving forward, as I said, now if we drill one level deeper, we could start to think about the types of services and tools that come into play when you think through what that digital transformation involves. So looking at the slide here, you'll see everything from disparate data sources as you look to pull data, all the data that's available to you, building data pipelines to ingest that data, building engines to transform and model and serve that data for everything from machine learning to data visualization, as well as data governance and storage of that data as a whole. So as you see, there's obviously many services across many cloud providers, on-prem solutions, third parties, custom solutions that you could build to solve many of these needs. And historically, building these types of pipelines would require taking all those services and stitching them together, which obviously introduces a lot of risk and complexity. This is where Synapse Analytics comes into play. Synapse Analytics brings together all these services, including enterprise data integration, data warehousing, and big data analytics, all in a single service that offers both on-demand and provision resources. It allows modernization of current data warehouse solutions, as well as development of on new modern development platforms and services. And because it's on Azure, it also includes deep integration with other services in Azure, such as Power BI, which we'll talk about, Azure Active Directory, Dynamics, Databricks, Azure AI, and everything in between. This leads to incredible time to insight over cloud scale data and reduced development time for structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data, all in a single service, all on a single data storage platform that's unified across all these tools. Finally, in order to get the most value out of that, we need to maximize the value by allowing everybody in the organization to find the data that's important to them. This is where Azure Purview comes into play. We believe data is a critical strategic asset, but we do believe that 73% is not currently being analyzed just because it isn't understood or people don't know where to look for it. So Purview was built to democratize access to all of this data. It helps transform undiscovered data into strategic assets. And to summarize, Purview helps solve these challenges by providing intuitive catalog that allows all users to search for all data using a language that they understand. Okay, so Amanda, if you want to take that back.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. All right, I'm actually going to hand it over to Deepika to talk about Synapse Analytics.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Alex, for setting the scene for the session. To start with, I wanted to start with a simple definition of what is Synapse. So Synapse is basically an evolution of the SQL data warehouse, which some of you might have previously heard of. What it's doing now is blending the concepts of data warehousing, data integration, big data analytics, and data visualizations into a single unified interface and service. So starting with the key element, that is data and its storage. Given the current data landscape and what we are seeing with some of our customers is there's an ever increasing need for flexibility to not only have data available in a traditional data warehouse setting that is highly structured and applied with applied business logic, but also to have access to more modern data storage mediums like a data lake that can hold a combination of structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. The traditional data warehouse are still very relevant for more operational day-to-day business processes, but a data lake is paving the path for accelerating data exploration and the ability to do applied analytics on scale. And obviously, with the need to store and transform data, there's an inherent need to also ingest this data, regardless of what its structure might be. Those familiar with Azure Data Factory will find that data ingestion principles of Synapse are very closely aligned with what will become evident also with the demo. And moving on to visualization and analytics, once the data is cleansed and stored within Azure Synapse resources, it is also important to understand what the data is actually telling us. So within Synapse, there is the ability to visualize and perform rapid analytics and exploratory data analysis directly on your Synapse storage resources. So by coupling these data concepts and encapsulating them into one product, Synapse offers a cohesive, collaborative environment for the users and to leverage it to its greatest extent. Now that we have an overview of Synapse as an end-to-end tool or an end-to-end data and analytics platform, I also wanted to touch upon what are the key considerations and opportunities that you might want to think about as you start exploring this new offering from Microsoft. Starting with organization of code and pipelines, Synapse is bringing tools together like Azure Data Factory, Azure Machine Learning, and also offers a chance to recycle and reuse them from potentially separate interfaces into one. With proper management and DevOps practices, there lies a great opportunity to cut down on redundant processes, leading to cost and also time savings. The next being DevOps. Synapse has all of the tools that can be used to provide end-to-end solution in one place. While all of this is well and good, this also presents a potential issue down the road due to magnitude of dependency, something as small as a single table within a data lake may have. As a result, it's quite important to instill a strong DevOps framework to ensure that the changes are managed appropriately within this framework. With the ability to query directly into the data lake and or data warehouse, there's also existing a powerful possibility for data scientists and analysts alike to test their respective hypotheses and questions that they have much quicker than they may have been able to do before due to integrated capability that Synapse offers. However, with those analysts having the ability to tap into the data lake directly or into the data warehouse, having right access configuration into the troves of this data becomes increasingly important to ensure that data is democratized appropriately so that your users can, within the organization, can understand the acceptable applications of Synapse integrated product offering and making the right data available to the right people. Something that we think is also quite significant from a reporting perspective is Synapse's the ability to visualize the results nearly immediately from your queries in Synapse. In the past, getting the data from ad hoc querying tool to the reporting application was very cumbersome, and you had to have a separate ETL tool and then start building your data models and Power BI reports. But now that the data with varying degrees of structure can be queried and visualized nearly immediately in Synapse's integrated workspace, it lends itself to being a great tool for one-off and ad hoc queries as well. And finally, sort of a tag on to the access and roles portion of the concept of data governance. Just because data and analytics capabilities and reporting tools are integrated into one product, it does not necessarily mean that everyone should be able to see and access the data in the same way. And to ensure that the data security is maintained, proper governance principles need to be applied to ensure that this integrated workspace doesn't become a free-for-all. And hope so all these considerations that we have just highlighted gives you some food for thought as you start your Synapse journey. And with that, I'll move on to a quick demo of Azure Synapse Analytics. As we see, I'm on the Azure portal, and launching into Azure Synapse Analytics gives me the option to open the Synapse Studio. And as I launch the Synapse Studio, which is basically an integrated web interface that I was talking about, which brings together the concepts of data ingestion, exploring and analyzing it, and visualizing it within the same framework. As I look on this main screen, on the left, we have a few activity hubs, the terminology that we will be using within Synapse Studio, starting with data, develop, integrate, monitor, and manage. As you can see on this homepage, there's also a bunch of content to give you, make you familiar with what are the different options that are available to you, and also a guide to some community articles. If I start with the data hub and go on to my link storage accounts, it gives you a simple place to access your data lake without having to open Azure Storage Explorer or link to it in any other different web tab. As I start browsing through the data, putting the hat of maybe a data scientist on, if I wanted to analyze the data available in my data lake, for example, looking at the flight data, maybe for over the years, and see maybe how the COVID has impacted my flight patterns, I can simply start browsing through the data lake, preview the data by a single click without having to use any ETL tools, and also start playing with it by a single click. As you can see, I have the option to browse it using a SQL script, or I can also start working on notebooks. Let me take the option of using the SQL script. As you can see, it has very easily generated a code for me, did not have to write any of it. I can run this. All right, this is. So I can run this query using two options. We have a built-in serverless SQL pool, talking a little bit about that. So within the Synapse workspace, you have the capability of query into the data lake or browse data without having to provision any data warehouse or any other SQL pools behind it. The built-in serverless SQL pool, the benefits of that being you can very easily browse through data without having to provision any resources. It's quite fast. You can query data at scale. And also another part being that you will be charged only by the queries that you're running and no hardware on the back of that. Looking at the other option of browsing using notebooks, as you can see, in this case, instead of creating a SQL script, I have now a Python script. So for data scientists who want to handle either bigger volumes of data or want to use other or are more comfortable using other languages, you can very conveniently switch between different languages within this notebook framework and execute them using the Apache Spark pools. Another great thing about using this framework to querying your data lake is that not only you can view your results in a quick manner, you can also visualize them and also export these results for further analysis. So in short, the Data Hub here is not only bringing your data lake into your fingertips, but also you can browse data within your data warehouse and also do big data analytics using Apache Spark within the same framework. And to think about how can you reuse some of these notebooks and SQL scripts, that's where the Develop Hub comes into the picture. As you can see, this is where all my SQL scripts are organized. Similarly, all my notebooks are organized as well. So in future, if you wanted to publish some of these notebooks and share your code within your organization, this would be a very easy way to do that. And for users who are not as familiar with coding languages and want a more UI interface to load their data or play around with the data, we also have the option of data flows. In this case, as you can see, it is a very simple drag and drop framework where the code is minimal or very little coding required, and all you need to do is drag and drop to create these data flows to analyze your data. And finally, what you also thinking your workspace is as simple as adding a linked service. So if you wanted to add a new Power BI workspace, all you have to do is select a link service to add, and you can very simply add a Power BI workspace and start in Power BI report on top of your data from the data lake. And create all of here referred to as the Azure Data Factory. You have the options here to linking to external databases as well. So for example, if you wanted to bring in data from not the data lake, but from an external source, you have 90+ connectors that you can connect to. If you wanted to schedule some of these SQL scripts or productionize some of your machine learning code, that would be very easily done with these Synapse pipelines. And to show you an example of how all of this can come together, we have created here a notebook which basically combines all the flight data. And what we've also done is done some machine learning, applied the ARIMA model, and we are using a forecasting model in this case to generate a forecasting output. And all of this, whether it's visualizations or building and training of model, all of this has been done within the Synapse Studio. So just giving you an example, how Synapse is bringing an end-to-end solution to your problems for not just browsing the data, exploring it, and also productionizing it. With that, I will hand back over to Amanda.
All right, Ben, handing it over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Deepika. So yeah, we'll just turn gears and we can talk about Purview, which newer of the two tools we're talking about today, currently in public preview. It's the manifestation of the Project Babylon, which I think was the in development name, but the kind of committed to and available tool is called Purview. So you can see it on your portal in public preview. So what is it? It's a software as a service tool, and it's really positioned as a data governance offering or data governance service, with the idea of being able to link all the different data sources and data assets that exist across your landscape and bring in a lot of interesting functionality to them. So, I mean, to us, I think data governance covers a number of different things. It might be thinking about data security. It might be thinking about things like data cataloging, data lineage. It might also cover more operational things such as data stewardship or data ownership and roles and responsibilities. So really a massive concept, and often we see groups at organizations devoted to data governance and thinking about the different tools which are at their disposal to implement strategies or workflows that allow people to get the best use and value out of their data. So looking at a couple of features of Purview, and I'll jump to a demo here pretty briefly to see it live. The ability to discover data. So we talked a bit about analytics and explorative insights and ways of looking at data. So how can I find data elements that I haven't looked at before? How can I understand how things are linked together? How can I properly classify data so I know if I'm using personal or sensitive data? Mapping between different data assets. So often we have a movement of data from an on-premise source to a data lake to maybe a data mart. So have that sort of lineage or mapping of shared data assets is quite valuable, particularly when we're thinking about global organizations and lots of sources and lots of data. Ability to track. So some interesting features is kind of the monitoring functionality of what's happening. What are all my sources? What's new? What's been added? Do I have personal data elements? And I think the next step is really taking those insights and turning them into actions. So what type of actions do I want to happen when I see a new data source pop up on as part of a scan, or when I'm bringing a new portion of my data lake online? What sort of actions do we want to happen from any kind of data cataloging or data governance standards? And I just mentioned cataloging, but keeping track of what do we have, where's it at? When we have hundreds of millions of data elements down to columns within spreadsheets or database tables, how are we somewhat having some organization and some theory around how they're kept up to date and tracked? And a few points here, and I think Alex alluded to, there's a huge portion of organizational data that's not being used and not being leveraged for analytics or as part of operational processes. So Purview, along with Synapse and other tools, is getting us along the way of being able to identify data, use data, and use it in reasonable and thoughtful ways. So a bit of an intro, and I'll jump here to a demonstration to bring it to light a little bit. You can see the home page here looks very similar to Synapse, what Deepak had just shown us. So, a similar obviously look and feel. Along the left-hand panes, we can see a number of options here. So my home page with some quick links. Sources, so that's all the different sources for which I'm linking to my Purview account. So I might have databases and data lakes, and I'll look at them in a little bit. A glossary, so a place to define terms, whether that's column elements or data elements, or maybe it's more general tagging or metadata you want to apply. Insights, so I'll click on that brief one, and I mentioned this of a kind of collection of information that's in a sense aggregated up and shared back to us, and thinking about how do we then drive some action from this. What does this mean for us? And you can see a number of different panes here that are at the moment available, and we would expect over time to be added to and enhanced. And then a management center, so more of an administrative support. So we look at our sources. You can see we have a couple of links here: data lake storage, a database, and our Power BI tenant. So linked a handful of things. If we look at adding new data sources at the moment, mostly just Microsoft sources, knowing that things like SAP and some AWS sources are currently in private preview. So expecting this to grow. The idea is to Purview here is a kind of all-encompassing, able to integrate and work with all the different data assets in one's organization, not just the Microsoft Cloud storage. If we look at the glossary here, so I mentioned to it a way to track information. So it could be data elements, could be other types of tags and metadata. So so we've entered a couple of things here, and can give an example of how we might use them. So I'll use the search functionality. So I'm interested in point of sale data, and I'll see a couple of things come back here. I can see a bit about different types of storage. And I'll pick the database here. So our EPOS sales, or excuse me, it's a table within a retail database. So I can see a lot of interesting information here about this table. I can see the columns. So we can see the schema, which is useful. We can see data types. Certainly things could be built out here as in terms of any data classifications, contact information, lineage. So all this sort of stuff's in one place, and this was automatically, accumulated through a scan. If we go in, we can do certain things like leveraging the glossary that I mentioned. So, for example, we have item number, which is maybe a very common attribute that's we call item. So it might be UPC or barcode, all these different names for it. So we'll mark that. And the other thing I might want to do, you can see I've already marked this as a point of sale or POS data set. This is also just for my US market, so I might want to delineate by geography or business function or something like that to make tracking a bit easier. So I'll make that change, and it will go and save. And if I again search POS, the same sort of thing will come up. But here you can see I've got a couple glossary terms. So you can imagine as we build this out, as in a practical example, we might have data from all over the world. I might just want to focus in on, okay, I'm just concerned about what US POS data we have, and that can narrow me down. And the last thing I'll show here is just some of the data classifications. So I'll maybe force its hand here and just search for something like a phone number. And you can see here it's kind of triggered some inbuilt classifications for what I thought of as personal data elements. So you can see here I searched phone number, and it's brought up a couple other things that it's recognized. And there's probably other ways to think about it where Purview is going out and looking for these things. We can see Microsoft's already inbuilt a number of rules, as I've mentioned, that are common personal or private data elements. You can see them here. And this is something you presumably can add to over time. So, very specific things for your business or your industry. But a really interesting way, and I think a challenge a lot of organizations are thinking about right now is how are we effectively managing and appropriately managing our personal data across the world with geographic needs and those sorts of things. And again, data is not brought into Purview. It's Purview's kind of going out and sampling and looking at data, but there's no way to see any actual data from here. We can just see schemas and those sorts of things. But again, security is still an important point to think about your different personas using the Purview tool. So a quick look and feel here, certainly something that people can start playing around with and think about how, how the operations and how the implementation of something like this would work in your organization, because the tool can do so much. But I think really to be effective, it's about how are you kind of applying it and using it effectively. So looking at time here, I want to make sure we have time for questions. I'll quickly wrap up, and then I'm interested in to hear your questions. So thinking about, we've talked about Purview, we talked about Synapse. Thinking about the Microsoft data landscape, are we, how is that helping us? So, and Deepika mentioned democratization of data. So we talked about making data available, centralizing access to data, using tools like Purview to find and kind of catalog information. Business empowerment. So, if we're surfacing data and surfacing ways in which users across the organization can work with data, reducing that dependency on IT to be providing data at all times or things like that. Flexibility. So it's always great to have options. There's not necessarily one tool that you have to use. It's the only way to do something. There's options. Maybe we want to store something in a data lake. Maybe we want to store it in a database. We have those options, and that's really effective. And it allows us to apply the best tool for the job. And unifying data platforms. So that's a theme here. Purview is bringing together data assets. Synapse is bringing together data functionality and data transformation, data pipelines into a single place. So some really key features here, and kind of plays back what Alex had led with, and a bit of how I think we've been helping our customers, particularly with these tools or kind of in general. We mentioned exploratory analytics. So particularly with COVID, when some businesses have been turned upside down, you're looking at things in new ways. You're using alternative data sources and having the ability to quickly access that data, understand it, and use it effectively can be highly valuable and kind of get ahead of competitors. MLOps and DevOps. So how are we taking these workflows and great code and great data sets and kind of operationalizing them, which is cutting down on manual interventions and manual errors with these different operations. Industrializing solutions. So something we're commonly doing is taking solutions and building them out, either scaling a POC or building the POC and then scaling it. And then things like strategies, so something we're commonly doing, particularly now as every day there's new features and new tools that are available. What does architecture strategy look like? And something we're helping customers with. So, like I mentioned, wanting to leave time to hear your questions. I'll turn it back over to Amanda to handle the session.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. And thank you to all of the presenters for the last 30 minutes or so here. All right. We do have about 9 minutes left for questions, and I thought I would start it off with a couple of questions we've actually heard from a few of our customers as we've been talking about these tools. So the first one, I'll hand it over to you, Alex. The question is, with the new Spark engine in Azure Synapse, what does that mean for Databricks? Is Databricks going away? Should we only be looking at Azure Synapse Spark pools going forward? What should we take away?
Sure, thanks, Amanda. I could take that one. That is a very common question that we get these days, and you can imagine why. The short answer is absolutely not. Databricks isn't going anywhere. We always talk about kind of a better together story with Databricks being tightly integrated with Synapse, and the whole idea is just making sure you're using the right tool for the right job. There are certainly cases where Databricks has functionality built into their Spark engine that isn't available in the open source version of Spark that's embedded inside of Synapse. There are considerations around whether you're using like machine learning use cases, whether you already have code built out and environments built out. We're not recommending that anybody migrate things just to migrate them. So it's all about evaluating the value that each service provides and using the appropriate one for your use case.
I may stick with you, Alex, unless someone else wants to come in. But another question we commonly get is around Power BI connectors. So Power BI can connect to a variety of different types of data sources. So are there any particular benefits to using Azure Synapse SQL pools with Power BI?
Yeah, and thanks. And again, I can definitely chime in on this one. It is a question that we get a lot. And then maybe when I'm done, I would be interested to hear if anybody else has any input or things that you've heard from your customers that I may not have heard from other partners that I work with. But again, the short answer is yeah, there's absolutely benefit. There is I don't know if we actually we did. We spent a fair bit of time, Deepika did on the presentation today, just looking at the integration of the development environments. So just from being able to access both services from a single pane of glass, there's benefit there in using the tools provided by Synapse and the tools provided by Power BI workspaces, but also from a performance standpoint. We believe, and the data kind of supports that the Synapse dedicated SQL pools perform better than any other data warehouse on the market from a price performance standpoint. So obviously there's going to be benefits there from modeling your star schema data there and using that in Power BI. And then on the roadmap, there's also specific things that are being built out to do things like behind the scenes, the engines will be automatically evaluating query plans to optimize patterns from Power BI, so that without being a data engineer, you can build Power BI reports and expect that performance will get better over time as you use your Power BI pulling data out of Synapse. So there's a couple of things that make it really valuable. But yeah, again, I'd be curious to hear if anybody else has any other thoughts around that.
Yeah, I could chime in there, Alex, with all your points. I think some places where kind of also seeing this come up is in real-time reporting. So not necessarily data that's coming in at that speed, but we might have some machine learning models that we want users to go and input some input parameters into it and see the results. So having some type of tooling, something supporting the background that's able to do that quickly allow us to see those results in real time or near real time. So like what if analysis is pretty popular. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is flexibility is great. The flexibility of Power BI to connect to all sorts of different data sources. The same with Data Factory and all the different tools to integrate and work with different data sources gives us flexibility. Maybe we want to leave something in a data lake as we're building out our Power BI report, and then we might want to productionize it. Or maybe it's data small, it's simple, we can leave it in data lake and not have to rely on the power of Synapse. So flexibility is also great, and the flexibility of the tools to work interoperable is pretty great. So that's I think that's what we're hearing, what we're seeing value in.
So that's awesome, and I probably should have mentioned that. I didn't even think about it, but another benefit, a huge benefit that people might not even be thinking about, is the fact that you can use the SQL endpoint that's provided for that SQL serverless engine. So you can, exactly like you just said, you can query a data lake directly using regular T-SQL syntax, which is really powerful.
All right, Ben or Deepika, I'll let you two fight this one out. Am I able to do DevOps, including the use of CI/CD with Azure Synapse?
I can answer that one. So the answer is yes. Certainly there's different ways people might approach CI/CD with whether using PowerShell or some of the inbuilt characteristics, and it probably depends on the CI/CD tool you might be using. But again, there are endpoints, or I guess really APIs, that exist for Synapse to allow you to deploy application code, so to move through environments, to manage your database solutions in something like Visual Studio in the same way we would manage any database. So integrates with CI/CD tools. There are the API endpoints to allow for deployments, and certainly I think it's an area where there's a lot of investment by software companies to build out the effectiveness of their like CI/CD capabilities. So things like building and automated testing and those sorts of functionality, which we're seeing a lot of investment into to accelerate delivery and development. But to answer your question shortly, yes, good integration with even like sitting in Git repository, code management, all kind of works fluidly and fits into those sorts of operations.
Great. All right, prompting again, if you do have any questions, feel free to send them through the chat pane. I will say that more often than not, security comes up as we're speaking to customers. So I'll stick with you, Ben. How do we ensure that different users aren't able to view, say, privates or sensitive data in Purview specifically?
Yeah, good question. So in Purview, it will not allow any users the ability to see data. So it will go to the schema level, if we think about it that way. So we'll be able to know what the columns are, what the structures are, but won't be able to see the actual data elements in it, which is of course useful, because the intention of Purview, or data governance tool, is to give a sense of what's out there as opposed to what the data is. We won't run into that. People won't run into that issue with Purview, but I think it's still important to think about what your implementation of Purview looks like. So there should be a number of different personas. You'll probably have some administrators that will be responsible for identifying which data sources they should connect to, managing things like credentials and something like key vault, so managing credentials effectively. And then you might have some more power users that are the ones that are assigning different metadata. So I had shown glossary terms. So they might be the people assigning that, or they might be responsible for determining which data sources do we start with, do we catalog first, those sorts of things. And then you might think about probably your biggest user base, which is your users, and what's the right level of access for them. What sorts of training programs do you need? What type of empowerment do you need to make sure people are getting the right value out of something like Purview? So again, Purview has a lot of great features and capabilities, and I think really to make it effective, you have to have a good plan and thoughtful implementation of how you're using it and how you expect your user base to use it.
And then on the flip side, how does it work, like security and role perspective in Synapse? So how do you provision but still restrict access to specific types of data as needed and as appropriate?
Yeah, no, I was just going to talk a little bit about the security from the Synapse perspective. So Microsoft offers, its comprehensive security framework with, like we had with Data Warehouse within Synapse as well. And there are multiple levels. Again, there's threat protection, network security, authentication, access control, and also data protection, which can be governed at a row level or a column level security. And there's also features like dynamic data masking, which can come into the picture if you need it. And all of this is included within the Synapse framework. So there's no additional cost for, setting up these different levels of security integration within your data warehouse. And in terms of, using your Azure Active Directory, so again, all of that sort of fits in quite cleanly. And again, you can govern it quite closely within the Synapse Analytics framework.
Yeah, and if I can really quickly add to that, all great points, Deep. Again, I think that that covers all the different levels of protection for the dedicated SQL pools, which were formerly called the data warehouse. In addition to that, there's an additional security framework that allows you to kind of govern access into that single pane, that workspace that we talked about and showed today. So you can restrict users, which tabs they are able to and are not able to see. And we spent a lot of time talking about like serverless access over data lakes and things like that. Obviously, you can still apply similar capabilities on the storage level. So you can secure your data lake folders based on individual use cases.
Awesome. So we are at time. I want to thank all of our presenters again for joining and presenting such great content. And thank you everyone else for attending the call. If you do have any other questions about what we discussed here today, please feel free to reach out. We'd be more than happy to set up a follow-up session to be able to answer those questions. But thank you again for your time this morning and have a great rest of your day.